Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Kristen Donnelly, and I am one of the good doctors of Abbey Research. At Abbey Research, we deeply believe that the world changes through stories and relationships, because honestly, it's the only thing that ever has. We may change our behaviors through statistics or shaming, but we don't actually change our minds. And the beginning of all of that is curiosity. All change starts with curiosity. And so that's what this series is in service to. It's called Welcome to My World. And I talk to fascinating folks who are different than me, which is literally every human person from all over the world, about something in their lives that the rest of us should know more about. And if we did, we could human a little bit better. Now, this is a special edition. Beep, 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 beep. We've never done it before, but it's very timely. And so this is a little bit out of the sequence. You'll see that there's not an episode number or anything else. And that's because I've had the privilege of knowing some incredible educators over the last year. No one more so than Laura Braun, who teaches secondary public high school in the state of Texas. And as we talk throughout the year about the challenges of being an educator in COVID, I was continually impressed with how little I understood, and how much I just felt my job, not only as a non-parent, but a non-educator, was to hold space. And so I want to encourage you all to do that too, as we sit here. We're talking in August of 2021, as we're having this conversation, every headline in the country is, what do we do about kids and school? And every school system is handling it differently. For our international viewers, just so you know, there is no national government system where the federal government can make one decision. We have taken all of the power and given it out to states, and states have in most cases given it out to school districts. So this is why this is such a drama here in the United States. I hear from international viewers that they don't get it. Well, I'm sure Laura will get into it a little bit for us as well, as to the specific ins and outs of for instance, the state of Pennsylvania is handling COVID very differently than the state of Texas. And that is something that we have talked about offline as friends. So this is part of the mess. So welcome so much. Laura's been teaching for like ever. And from what she tells me of her classes, is absolutely somebody that I would want all my kids to learn from. One of the most creative, innovative, empathetic, compassionate, and excellent educators I've come across. Demands excellence from her students, and they always rise to the challenge, because that's what students do. So Laura, thank you so much for joining me for this special edition.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So let's start with something a little bit more fun. Tell us why you're a teacher. How did this kind of start? Because it wasn't always about face masks and nasal swabs.
Right. So I think it's kind of ironic that you say fun, actually. So I graduated from college, like I got my undergrad in 2008. So I graduated right into the economic meltdown, and education was pretty much the only thing that was hiring.
Fair.
So and I've been teaching in Houston my entire career. So my first year teaching was when Ike landed. So that was kind of my introduction to education. But the group of kids I had that year, they were so resilient, and they were so, just kind of like open to like whatever the universe was going to give us and whatever I was going to give them. Thank God, as a first year teacher, let me tell you. And, so the kind of, oh, well, I'll do this for a couple of years until the economy kind of like rights itself, turned into much more of a career than I ever really expected it to. And I ended up really, really, like loving it. And, my parents always make fun of me every year, because they're like, oh, you call your students your kids. And I'm like, well, they are, for 9 months, they're my kids. And then like when I see them out in the community, like literally I went to Chick-fil-A yesterday for dinner, and the kid who took my order is the kid that we had in our summer SAT prep program. And she remembered me, and she was like, you were the English teacher. So, like those relationships don't end at 2:40 or in June or, whatever. So like that's kind of been something that was really unexpected for me, and that really has like kept me in the profession for sure.
I love that. And it's, like we hear, obviously you all are underpaid and under-resourced nationally, like that's a national thing. forever. But one of the things that I love in our conversations is how the kind of constant creativity that you bring to it. It's like, well, okay, I'm teaching Hamlet this year and this is how I'm going to do it. And I'd imagine that if you weren't like necessarily trained as a teacher, a lot of that pedagogy you've kind of had to learn on the fly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like, so because my degree is in English, I went through what's called alternative certification.
Okay.
So basically my first year as a classroom teacher is what most like people who go in, like who know they're wanting to go into education, that's the year that they're still spending student teaching, so they have that kind of like safety net.
Right.
And I mean, alternative certification builds that in other ways, but yeah, you're very much learning by doing. So, you know, like it's hard because, you know, a lot of teachers like to joke that like all of the GT kids end up in education. So sometimes it can be hard to admit that you're wrong about something. But I think when you go through alternative certification, it's much, much easier because it's a very like, you lay yourself bare that first year. So then you're very much like, you know what, I've got nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, I mean, it's gifted. GET for international viewers is gifted and talented, which is a thing that existed in the public school system in like the 80s and into the 90s. And I have they gotten rid of it? I hope they have. No.
So GT is actually covered by the same kind of umbrella of legislation as special education.
Cool, because it didn't do anything to help me grow and only gave me a ton of complexes. So,
and so as kind of educational theory has evolved, because I have to renew my own GT certification every year.
Okay.
You know, we've learned a lot more about the nature and needs of like GT kids and how to, you know, kind of engage them with, you know, educational experiences that will offer them more enrichment. Because one of the things, and I'm really proud of the way my district does this, one of the things that they're really harp on with GT kids, like with their curriculum, is that more is not better, more is just more. So
yeah, I was definitely not taught that lesson.
Yeah, well, and so like our, you know, kind of our focus in our district with our GT education has pushed much more towards like project-based learning, experience learning. So, you know, our GT kids are learning to take on kind of like longer term investigations that are much more to their own, like geared towards their own interests.
Yeah, like so, almost like an independent study in college and grad school. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. Like the capstone paper that my freshman comp kids end the year with, they get to investigate whatever they want. So like I'm reading, you know, when these research papers come in, like I'm reading papers about all kinds of things. I'm reading about history things, and, you know, like one of my kids wrote about Legally Blonde, and, you know, then I've got kids who are writing about science things, and it's the whole gamut, and it's so interesting, and I learn stuff every year from them.
I love it. I love it. And I'm thinking about how in a you know, certain way, the way that you've been forced to always kind of evolve and find things a little bit on the fly might have prepared you a little bit more for COVID than some of my other traditional educators who have very, very specific ideas. But it's still a trauma, and we need to kind of think that. So can you give us a little bit of, you know, I mean, we all know what it was like the first 3 months, in that none of us will ever know what it was like for each other. But let's talk about the 2020-21 school year and kind of give me a little bit of a flavor. You know, were you guys hybrid? Was there a lot of debate? Like, kind of give me a picture of what that year was for you.
So, our district was kind of a mess, I'm not gonna lie. So we, towards the end of July, we found out that we were gonna be starting later than we normally do, but that we were gonna be starting hybrid. So they're like, so we actually had more staff development last year than we normally do, like in the run up to the school year starting, because normally we do basically we had double staff development, what we normally did last year. So it felt like we were in planning for forever. But then we were still totally unprepared when the school year started, it felt like. So we started later. We found out we were starting hybrid. And our district was a little vague about what kind of safety nets were going to be in place. And like, I feel bad for them in hindsight because, they at the time were doing the best they can with what they had. But because they didn't have a lot of details to give us right away, there were a lot of people who were very unhappy with what they were getting. And so, like there was one day where we were literally told, oh, there's been a TRO against having to come in person. So tomorrow you don't have to show up, but you do still need to like dial in, like it was wild. And then of course, Hurricane Laura landed too. Because why not?
Yeah. Y'all had a bit of a Q3 of 2020.
Yeah, we did. So it was like the run up to the school year was really kind of messy, and like the desk shields that we got for our classrooms, we didn't actually get until the weekend before kids actually showed up. And because they were delivered so last minute, they weren't actually set up. So the first thing I did when I got to work the first day of school was set up 25 desk shields for my in-person kids. And so since we were hybrid, we had some kids who were in person and we had some kids who were in the Zoom, and kids could reselect at the end of every grading period what they wanted to do. So I would have in-person kids who would go on to Zoom, and I would have Zoom kids who would come into person. And then, like if kids were...
Were you teaching these guys at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Or were there, so in the same classroom, there was kids on Zoom and kids in person, or at all?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had this like, so the Friday before school started, I actually spent like 30 minutes with my mom on Zoom testing my setup, so I knew that it would work.
Fair.
Because, so like, I actually ended up with like this 2-computer like multi-box setup.
Okay.
Which, I've never been so thankful to be a PC gamer in my life as I was this year.
I can imagine. That's how I felt a lot. Like, oh, I know Discord and Zoom and like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I know all these things. I can, and of course, like I'm part of the like Nintendo generation.
Yep.
So we'll just play with technology until it works. Cause I'm like, if they've given it to me, I surely can't break it. So like I had my district issue laptop that was hooked up to my Promethean, and so that was where I would run like any videos like TED Talks or whatever that I showed my kids, Google slideshows, if I was going to show them where something was located and how to access it in our learning management system, I would run it through the Promethean computer. And then the computer that I'm actually using right now to talk to you, which is my personal laptop, I had just set up on a table at the front of the room, and that was the computer. And they both had Zoom on, by the way. And this was the one that had the Zoom with the mic and the video turned on, so my kids who were on the Zoom could see me and hear me. So every passing period, when my in-person kids from the last period were leaving and my new ones were coming in, I was resetting for the new class, shutting down the old Zoom, turning on the new Zoom on 2 different computers in 7 minutes. So by the end of the year, man, I got down to a science.
Oh,
so I got
sure.
to the point where I could reset the Zooms and go to the bathroom. It was like the best thing. I was like, this is how you're living the dream, is if you've got time to go to the bathroom.
I mean, honestly, like no joke. And that's even in life. If you have time and freedom to pee, I think then we've all achieved nirvana.
Yeah, no, but for the first probably month, it was like
Laura,
the worst technological juggling act you can possibly imagine.
And then in terms of, I mean, you mentioned everyone was doing the best they could. And I am a believer that as a business owner in the middle of all of this, we always were as well. Like everything was evolving at the speed of literally light. I mean, we just didn't know, excuse me, from day to day of what was going to happen. But one of the things I have consistently heard from teachers is that the ball that got dropped was any sort of emotional support, kind of any mental health conversations, anything like that for staff. Was that your case as well? Was anyone checking in with you throughout this year? Okay.
I mean, that's not fair. That implies that my husband wasn't, and my parents weren't, and my in-laws
I apologize.
weren't.
I meant staff from the official. I mean, I was certainly checking in on you. So, but like staff, this was one. I mean, I think districts ran out of bandwidth. This isn't a indictment on districts.
Oh, absolutely
but
not.
This is a, like, let's just have an honest conversation about the lack of emotional support last year for all of you on this front line. And especially because we didn't refer to you as a nation as frontline workers, and you were.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think like, so I think my district was kind of lucky because we're quite large.
Okay. Yeah.
So we did already have the, kind of like employee like support systems in place. And, like we would get occasional reminders of like, hey, don't forget this is here. But like, it wasn't necessarily so much that teachers forgot it was there so much as we were like, I have to, because like we also got a brand new learning management system this year, because before we had just been using Google Classroom, and then they dumped this new website on us. So we had to learn it in the staff development window, because that was when we got access to it. And then we had to teach our kids how to use it. And my kids got to the point where something didn't work on technology, it was 99% of the time, it was our learning management system. And we just kind of, my kids just kind of got to the point where they were like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, this is the worst. So like, I just kind of got in the habit of like, I would have everything that I needed for both of the levels that I taught. I would have them open, like, if we needed an assignment sheet for a writing assignment, or, like anything like that. I got to the point where I would just leave it open in separate tabs on my Promethean, so that if I couldn't show my kids how to access it on Schoology, I could just leave it pulled open. Like I could just open up the Google Doc and could be like, here it is. Because then the kids on Zoom could see it because I had the screen share on. And the kids in person could just come out to the Promethean and scroll and read what they needed to, and then go back to their seats. So like you had to just kind of figure out those workarounds, like as you were going. And, God bless my children. I had the most patient souls with me this year. They were just like, you know what? It's fine. We're going to make it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things I've heard from parents, excuse me, is that was a lot of the kids' vibe, is just like, we don't have control over anything. So yeah, here we go.
And, kind of going along with that, like that kind of idea of compassion, I think our kids picked up really quickly that we didn't have a lot of control over stuff. So they kind of extended the same grace to us that we were giving to them, in terms of like, we get that this is a hot mess. We get that, X is broken, or Y is not working, or Z won't connect, or whatever. And like, I got into, like, there was one day, the Wi-Fi for the entire district went down for like 3 hours. So I
remember that you messaged me and you were like, so I'm not teaching today.
Yeah. I was like, I'm only teaching like 2/3 of my kids. It's fine. I'm fine. So I was sending out the directions for the day in the remind every class period. So my Zoom kids wouldn't, because all of my classes are above level. And so, they're the kind of kids who are like, what am I missing? What should I be doing? Yeah. And so, which is great. Like, I love that, because, then we get to go on educational adventures together. I don't have the fashion sense of Miss Frizzle, but like the enthusiasm is definitely there. Don't get me wrong. So, I was sending out directions to them in the reminder. I was like, hey, the Wi-Fi is down. So this is what we're doing. Here's where you can find it on Schoology. Thank goodness I had, like our our district has actually paid for us to get reminds. So now we can send messages to our kids that are more than 140 characters. So it was easier to, when that kind of stuff would happen, again, just, you know, to quote the immortal Tim Gunn, make it work.
Yeah.
And, you know, we would figure something out every single day. And, you know, we got it done.
Yeah. So looking at this school year, we're sitting in August. Do you guys have what's the plan for 21 to 22?
Oh,
got it. Okay. Got it.
I don't want to say we're going to find out, but
we're going to find
out. So as you know, because everyone in the States, you know, with headlines being what they are, got treated to a front row seat of the way Texas executive orders have evolved. I
mean, your governor makes choices.
Yes. So the current executive order that we are under, basically makes it more difficult to implement mandates in kind of like public spaces. So like city buildings, county buildings, school districts are technically considered public buildings because we're government entities. So, you know, our district and, you know, because of course, like the Texas Education Agency above us, they're kind of bound by that same sort of, they're bound by the same executive order. So they can't tell us anything more strict than the executive order. So, you know, it's that kind of trickle down effect, right? So hiccups. So we kind of are going to have a lot more freedom, which of course always, you know, it like to me this year is like we have a lot more power to kind of decide what we want to do and how we're going to do it. And to me, this is very much that like Spider-Man moment, right? Like we have a lot of power, so there's going to be a lot of responsibility that's going to come along with that. And, you know, I'm personally going to try to use this as like a learning experience for my kids. Cause I tell my kids all the time, you know, like we're learning how to be people in my class just as much as we're learning how to be, you know, readers, writers, whatever. So like one of the things that we're, you know, going to kind of have to have a conversation about is how to, you know, be conscientious about the choices we're making. So right now we're going to be in person. Like it's going to be much like, I don't think the district can just completely rule out some sort of online option because, you know, I mean, we have to serve everyone who shows up on our doorstep and, you know, like we've got kids that I'm sure their parents are terrified to send them back to school because of medical issues, you know, all kinds of things, or maybe can't send them back to school because, you know, health and safety, stuff like that. So I don't think we're going to be completely in person, but I don't think my classes are going to be hybrid the way they were last year.
Okay.
I think it's going to be much more kind of traditional, but of course, you know, like with the way our numbers in Texas, and I mean nationwide, let's be real, with the way they're trending and stuff like that, I don't think we can just ignore that either. So I'm at the bottom of the decision-making totem pole. Yeah. So as of right now, we're going to be looking more traditional than we did last year.
Okay.
But we've been told that we can wear masks if we want to. I know I want to, because not getting so much as a cold for the past 18 months has really been awesome. So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's Aaron and I have been talking about like how once we all go back inside all the time again, like we're going to be wearing masks because it was really nice to not get my traditional January flu. So yeah, that was pretty great. Okay. Well, first of all, on behalf of everybody, let me do the cheesy thing, but to thank you, because the emotional labor of being an educator, one, and then the emotional labor of being for some of the students, I'm sure, because the other thing we all need to remember is that students have their own opinions about COVID, and they may or may not agree with their parents. They may or may not agree with their friends. And sometimes this is why having third-party adults can be so incredibly important, is that it's another perspective for them. It's another potential safe place. It's all those kind of things. And so you carried that last year. You'll carry that again this year. So thank you.
Oh, for sure.
For doing that. Despite falling into it because of the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Like, thank you for sticking around. If someone's watching this and they love a school teacher in their lives, or they've got a kid that's in public school in particular, what do you want them, like, how can we care for you guys this year?
Canisters of Lysol wipes, hand sanitizer. I ask for those every year, but I think this year, that last year and this year more than anything. Honestly, the biggest thing is just to kind of listen, and not because a lot of times, and I know I had this experience last night because my husband had a day, he's in education as well. Like, the biggest thing that he needed was he just needed somebody to listen to all of the ways that people had not listened to him during the day. And he just needed a place to kind of lay that down and not have to deal with it anymore. And like, he didn't want, and coming from the consummate fixer, he didn't want a fix. He didn't want advice. He just needed a place to kind of put that down. And because the most stressful thing in my life is that, I might go to Target later today. It's very, very easy for me to do that for him. And because of his role in the school that he's at, once the school year starts, it will become easier, kind of for him to do that for me, and like that. So like, that's kind of the biggest thing is when a lot of times when educators, since all this started, when we talk about the stuff that we're dealing with, it's not necessarily because we want advice or because we want somebody to be like, oh, it'll be okay. We just need a place to kind of set it down. At least, that's kind of my experience, because my sister-in-law is in education too. And she teaches an elective, or she taught an elective this past year. She's moved into a different role this year. And the life of an elective teacher is, I already knew it was very, very different than my life because I teach a core subject. But like last year, it was so different. Like, I mean, the stuff that she had to deal with compared to me. And so it's easy because I know I do the same thing. When I hear somebody start, like bringing me their problems, I'm like, well, trying to think about, okay, how can I fix this for them? How can I, like, what advice or what help can I offer? And 99% of the time, that's not what we need.
Yeah.
And I think it's really just because what happens in the four walls of our classrooms and what happens in kind of the four walls even of our building is something that is very, very unique. And so, like, even sometimes advice from teacher to teacher can't really fit, because like the kids that I have are very, very different than my coaching friend. The kids he has, like, we're on the same team, we teach the same age kids, but because they're different levels,
yeah,
right, and even different humans, if they, like, like my level partner and I, like, because we have different humans, sometimes what works for me doesn't work for him, and vice versa, of course. So a lot of the times it's not necessarily that we want advice, it's that we want to feel heard.
Yeah. And I think that is a gorgeous place to end, because not only is that a truth for all people, but it's especially a truth right now.
Yeah.
Especially as we are all in global, communal, individual, perpetual trauma.
Well, and the thing I think too that a lot of people kind of forget is that teachers are at the bottom of the decision-making totem pole.
Yep.
When it comes to masks, desk shield, social distancing, all of the kinds of things that people love to complain about. We're at the bottom of that decision-making totem pole, but we're the people who have to implement all of those decisions. So we look like we've made a lot of the decisions. In reality, we haven't. So, just kind of like, that's the other thing too, is that we look like we have a whole lot of power, and that is not always the case.
Yeah. And also, you guys are the ones in charge of translating it across a developmental spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, oh man. Well, again, thank you for joining me. I hope everyone that listened took some of this on board. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned something, please hit the thumbs up, because the YouTube algorithm really loves it. If you like these kind of conversations that are empathetic and curious and sometimes a little difficult, but always authentic, then please, please subscribe to my channel. We have them all over the place, from talking about teaching during COVID to being the parent of a differently abled child, to what Erin and I think about Falcon and Winter Soldier. We cover it all here, and you don't want to miss a single thing. I want to thank hero and educator Laura Braun for being my guest. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your summer of rest and rejuvenation to talk to me about highly stressful things. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And guys, I will see you next time on Welcome to My World. I am Dr. Kristen. My guest has been Laura Braun. You have been amazing as always, and I'll see you next time. Bye.